to Go, a 40-day journey to the never reached. I'm Jeff Hartensfeld. This is Brian Webb. We hope that you've been enjoying this study with us on these Go words. I know that as we've interacted on these, we're having a great time and really, just going deeper in some of these things. Today we're going to talk about this concept of go anyway.
Yeah.
And this is really going to kind of bring to the forefront the sacrificial side of going.
Right.
And, it's kind of like there's a lot out there, but go anyway.
Yeah.
And so let's read the scripture. Pretty cool story here, very well-known story of interaction between Peter and Jesus right before his ascension. So we got John 21, starting with verse 15. It says, "When they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, 'Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?' He said to him, 'Yes, Lord, you know that I love you.' He said to him, 'Feed my lambs.' He said to him a second time, 'Simon, son of John, do you love me?' He said to him, 'Yes, Lord, you know that I love you.' He said to him, 'Tend my sheep.' He said to him the third time, 'Simon, son of John, do you love me?' Peter was grieved because he said to him the third time, 'Do you love me?' And he said to him, 'Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you.' Jesus said to him, 'Feed my sheep. Truly, truly, I say to you, when you were young, you used to dress yourself and walk wherever you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and another will dress you and carry you where you do not want to go.' Then he said to show by what kind of death he was glorified. He was to glorify God. And after saying this, he said to him, 'Follow me.'" So pretty powerful scripture where, Jesus is actually talking to Peter about how he was also going to eventually, tradition has it that, Peter was also then crucified upside down.
Right.
Go anyway, despite what I'm telling you is going to happen here.
Yeah.
Pretty somber words here. So
Well, that's the idea of go anyway. And as you know, we talked about this initially, maybe being go reluctantly.
yeah, right. I guess we'd be a little reluctant if we were
Well,
dive into something like that.
right. And what Jesus actually says to Peter is, you're going to go where you don't want to go.
Yeah, right.
So the context on this, we talked about go together.
Right.
Where Peter said, "I'm going fishing."
Right.
And they caught nothing. Okay, this is the remainder of that story.
Right.
They've been out fishing all night. They've caught nothing. Jesus is walking on the shore. They don't know it's Jesus.
Right.
And he says to them, "Have you caught anything?" "Nah, throw your nets over on the other side." They obey. They catch this enormous group of fish. As they're trying to pull them in the boat, John says, "That's Jesus."
Yeah.
And when John says, "That's Jesus," Peter jumps in the water, swims to shore. Jesus has already got some fish laid out on the fire.
He already caught some, right?
Yeah, and he says, "Bring some of those fish you just caught. We're gonna eat this."
We're gonna have breakfast together.
Yeah, and so they're eating, they're enjoying. Peter, I can just kind of see him. He's eating these fish, and the bones are falling out the corners of his mouth, and he's really having a good time. And Jesus says, "Peter, do you love me?"
Yeah.
And the word that Jesus used is, "Do you agape me?"
Yeah.
So Jesus had really broken down agape for the disciples a little earlier on when he said, there's no greater love that a man would lay down his life for his friends.
Right.
He was talking about the sacrifice he was going to make, but that's the cost of agape. Agape is you lay down everything. And Peter's response was, "Lord, I phileo you.
Yeah.
I love you like a friend."
Yeah.
Yeah. And so Jesus says again, "Peter." So I'm sure Peter's sitting there and he's hoping like Jesus is going to talk to John next.
Let it go, right?
Right. Jesus is going to
I have
talk to
my
Andrew
time.
next, right? But he says again, "Peter, do you agape me?" And Peter says, "Lord, you know I phileo you.
Yeah.
You know I love you like a friend."
Yeah.
And that's where Jesus comes back and says, "Do you even love me like a friend?" And it's Peter was grieved about that.
Right.
Why would you question,
just
"Lord,
said it
you know
twice."
everything, right? You know, I really do. Peter couldn't get himself to the point of saying, I have an agape love. And then Jesus just went ahead and prophesied for him. And he said, look, today you can't get to that point of saying, I love you enough to lay down my life. But he said, one day you're going to go.
He'll do it.
You're going to go anyway. And I've read that scripture, I don't know, 100 times. I never saw the crucifixion in it. It really, like in the next verse, it says, by this, Jesus prophesied as to how Peter would glorify God in his death.
Yeah.
I never saw crucifixion there.
Right.
Until we did this study. And that word where he's talking about you're going to go where you don't want to go, that word that is used there is translated in other places, bear or carry. And it's used, and they carried him to a place called Golgotha. In other words, when Jesus said you're going to go where you don't want to go, Peter, James, John all understood, Peter, you're going to the cross. Every believer must come to that point of going to the cross.
Right. In Peter's case, it turned out to be literal.
It was very literal.
It became literal for him. But no wonder we've got this concept of go anyway, and how important this was. We're in this 40-day journey from resurrection to ascension. And during that 40 days, it's obvious that Jesus was trying to lay down a foundation for my departure. Go was such an important part of that. And he was preparing his followers for this suffering aspect. It wasn't just Peter. It was really meant to be spoken to us as well. So we've discussed this between ourselves, but that going, and when we talk about going to the never reached, there's a real cross there. Yeah, that's right.
Like a lot of times we say, I'm going to pick up my cross, but we're talking about really some pretty insignificant things. But going to the never reached means leaving your family.
Yeah, that's right.
It means leaving the people that you love. It means, there's one of the devotions there, leaving family anyway. And she talks about the cost of having her kids grow up, not knowing their grandparents, and the pain of that.
Let me read Missy's quote. Reluctance is okay as long as we go anyway. It means we've counted the costs, the sacrifices we must make. My human heart tells me not to go there, but because of what God has done, I go anyway. So, that's like filling that up over and over again is this idea in our devotionals about going anyway. So, there were just a lot of things about counting the price and the cost. I feel like Christianity lived without any price or cost. And it's not a martyrdom syndrome, because Christ has died for us already. So the price of our sin has been paid for. And yet, people still wait to hear for the first time. And to bridge that gospel across culture, across ocean, across language barriers, across religious barriers, there will be a sacrifice. And the spiritual warfare is real over this. According to tradition, except for John, every single one of the disciples was martyred. There was a great cost to be paid by the disciples of Christ. And so I think we're moving into that place even here in the United States, and I think every part of the world has its level of persecution. But I want to encourage you as you're talking about this now, and we get into this go anyway discussion, consider the sacrifices that you aren't making, and then consider the sacrifices of missionaries and some of the people who wrote these devotionals are making to bring the gospel to places where it's never been heard. So thanks for joining us for this journey to the never reach, this 40-day journey that we're on. And we want to encourage you that no matter what the cost, that you would go anyway, because there's people that are waiting to hear, in many cases for the first time. God bless you guys as you study together.